Greetings. I was just about to open the book. Please have a seat and make yourself comfortable. Today's chapter is an intriguing one. Chapter 4.
How can 10 men get killed by one child?
Hideshi asked angrily. He gnashed his teeth as the driver, the only surviving man from the battle, relayed the bad news. He sat in his chair facing the window with the lights dimmed.
"This wasn't an ordinary child, sir,"
said the driver nervously.
"This green-eyed, brown-haired kid turned into a werewolf and attacked us."
What?
Hideshi exclaimed, rising out of his seat, still facing the window.
How is this possible?
"I don't know, sir, but we are looking in that."
You better or else.
Hideshi's shadow elongated, casting itself onto the wall. A pair of blood-red eyes illuminated the driver's periphery as the shapeless and spacious shadow began to slowly transform into a hideous creature. Beads of sweat ran down the driver's cheek as eerie sounds filled the room.
Yes, sir."
The driver stuttered as he ran off in terror. Hideshi sat back down. Suddenly his phone rang.
Yes.
Hideshi answered.
"This is Sergeant Greggs of NYPD.
Replied Sergeant Greggs.
I did a forensic sweep like you asked and found a few blood spots around the scene. I'll call you with the results."
Hideshi grinned.
Excellent.
Compared to Saturday, Monday seemed so mundane. Rosa and Andrew were in algebra class, silently talking about Saturday's incident. While Mr. Smith wasn't looking, they passed notes to each other. It was easy since Andrew sat in front of Rosa. Upon replying to Rosa's question, a young man with spiky red hair and blue eyes whispered to him.
"When I used to date Maria, we used our phones to write to each other."
"Shut up, DJ."
Andrew whispered back. DJ was short for Dennis Jr. Almost everyone called him DJ.
"Hey, Captain Planet wants us to save the trees."
DJ joked. Andrew chuckled as he continued to write. As the day went on, Andrew couldn't stop thinking about how he transformed into Okami. He felt stronger and faster, but one question ran through his mind. How did he manage to keep his clothes from shredding? Andrew knows from watching horror movies, when people transform into creatures, their clothes are shredded. However, his clothes stayed on.
Maybe I'll ask Madame Renee that question.
As the bell rang for dismissal, Andrew walked up to his locker and exchanged a few books. He looked down at his watch for a moment. He wondered if he'd have time to ask Mark's teachers for their assignments before catching the next bus. Andrew looked up and looked down the hallway. There was Rosa, walking down the hallway. Her hips swayed to and fro with every step, and her hair shined brightly, like those shampoo commercials. Andrew's face became flush.
Hey, Drew.
Rosa asked as she opened her locker.
Hey,
Andrew replied bashfully.
Let's go see Mark, okay?
Wait, I
know, but I figured you would.
Rosa replied and grabbed Andrew's arm. Andrew's face turned bright red.
Let's go now.
She said as she dragged Andrew down the hallway straight to the metro bus stop. Our Lady of Mercy Hospital was in downtown Bronx, near Yonkers and White Plains. It was a large old building with cracks on the outer walls and on the pavement. Inside, the walls were painted in an off-white color and the floors were tiled. When Rosa and Andrew arrived at the hospital, they both saw Mark's parents sitting in the waiting room.
Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Rivers.
Andrew said, waving to them.
Hey, Andrew,
said Mr. Rivers, getting up from his seat to shake Andrew's hand.
How's Mark?
Rosa asked.
He's fine. The doctor took him to the X-ray room to check on his progress.
Mrs. Rivers answered. Mr. Rivers was a big and tall kind of man. He had an oval face, a wide nose, curly black hair, and dark brown eyes. He wore his usual khaki slacks with a white dress shirt and a blue tie. Mrs. Rivers was 2 feet shorter than Mr. Rivers and had the same characteristics as Mr. Rivers, except for the hair. Her hair was short and brown. She was still wearing her green scrubs since she just finished her day shift. Nearly an hour passed when the doctor suddenly came to them and told them they could see Mark. Rosa grabbed Andrew's arm and led him to Mark's room. Mark was already sitting up on the bed watching TV. Rosa and Andrew greeted him as they sat down on the couch next to his bed. Of course, Mrs. Rivers was constantly asking him if he was comfortable. Mark looked at Andrew for a moment before he looked at his parents.
Mom, Dad, Rosa, I would like to speak to Andrew alone.
Mark, you're not hiding something, are you?
Mrs. Rivers asked with a concerned look.
You and Andrew aren't.
Mom, please.
Mark exclaimed.
It ain't like that. Can you just leave the room for a sec, please?
Mr. Rivers touched Mrs. Rivers' shoulder.
Sure, son. Whatever you want.
They left the room, closing the door behind them. Andrew looked at Mark.
So what's up?
Check this out. Doc took another x-ray of my ribs and noticed that they recovered by 50%. I ain't a doctor, but ribs don't heal that fast.
Maybe the tattoo is healing you.
Maybe,
Mark said and paused for a moment. Silence filled the air.
Yo, did you find out anything on Hideshi?
Mark asked.
Nah, I don't know where to start.
Andrew said, looking outside the window.
He could be anywhere. Listen, I gotta go. I'll talk to you later.
They bumped fists. Suddenly, Mrs. Rivers opened the door. Still concerned about her son's behavior, she glared at them.
Mom, we don't swing that way,
Mark said as he clasped his hands together.
so please stop giving us the glare. If you want to know, I was asking Drew to tell me what my assignments were, as well as my test scores. I didn't think I passed 2 of them, and I didn't want you worrying even more, okay?
Have it your way.
Replied Mrs. Rivers. She looked at Andrew.
So, Andrew, how are his test scores?
Andrew paused for a moment, trying to recollect the tests.
He got an A on his history test and a B on his chemistry test.
Yo, for reals?
Mark asked with a surprised look.
I thought I failed that chem test.
Well, I gotta go.
Said Andrew as he headed for the door.
Unlike Mark, I'm grounded and can't stay out past 9. I'll see you later.
Andrew waved goodbye and left the room. Irritation slowly built up inside Rosa. She quickly said goodbye to Mark and Mr. and Mrs. Rivers as she tried to catch up with Andrew. There, she found him waiting for an elevator.
I see you were going to leave me.
Rosa said, looking at him with an angry face.
I thought you were going to stay longer.
Andrew said, trying not to sound mean.
And how would I get home?
Have you ever thought about asking Mr. Rivers?
You can be such a jerk sometimes.
Rosa said angrily.
A jerk. You're the one who insisted on coming with me when you could have gone with Ms. Sanchez.
Is it wrong to have someone protect me after what happened on Saturday?
She asked, almost crying. Andrew didn't answer. He could see fear in her eyes and see her body tremble. She was right. He was being a jerk.
I'm sorry,
Andrew said softly.
I didn't mean to.
Rosa quickly walked off. Andrew sighed heavily before trailing behind her.
Beast of the Bronx.
3 days later, Mark was released from the hospital. Since Mr. Rivers was at work, Mrs. Rivers came to pick him up. After eating an oily breakfast at McDonald's, they went home. Mark lived on Hill Avenue, 3 blocks from where Andrew lived. The house was a red brick 2-story house with a huge window on the first floor and 4 smaller windows on the second. The inside was beautiful. The walls and ceilings were painted tan and green with sand-colored carpeting, while the ceiling fan and chandeliers gave the house that homey feeling. Even though Mark was tired, he wanted to get his homework done. He went upstairs to his room and found the list with the homework assignments. Luckily, Mark had history homework to do.
This stuff is mad easy.
He said to himself as he started at his history homework. Hours later, Mark woke up to his stomach growling. He decided to make a turkey sandwich, seeing that Mr. Rivers hasn't finished the turkey deli meat. He went downstairs to the kitchen and headed straight for the refrigerator. He noticed a note stuck on the refrigerator door. It read,
Mark, I'm at work now. Try to get something to eat and make sure to call your dad. I'll be home tonight around 10 or 11. Mom.
Mark sighed with a smile. He opened the refrigerator door, looking for turkey meat, mayo, cheese, and pickles. Grabbing each one, he set them on the counter. He went to the bread pantry to get white bread. Minutes later, Mark made his sandwich. He gazed upon its beauty and felt proud of his masterpiece. This sandwich consisted of 3 fine slices of turkey meat, 2 thin slices of cheese, 2 juicy dill pickle slices, and a light coat of mayo on 2 fresh pieces of bread. But something was missing from his artwork. He went to the pantry, found a bag of potato chips, and poured some next to his sandwich. He grabbed his plate and set it down on the table. He stared at his plate some more and still felt something was missing. He grabbed a glass from the cupboard and set it on the counter. Mark opened the fridge door, searching for the perfect drink to complement his masterpiece. He saw water, orange juice, cranberry juice, and milk lined up in the front. Mark stood there, indecisive of his drink. He rubbed his chin, staring at his limited choices. Suddenly, like a blessing from God, he saw the neck of a glass pitcher in the far corner of the fridge. He cast aside the other drinks and found a pitcher of purple juice. Tears of joy came upon his soul as he grabbed the pitcher and poured it into the glass.
Nothing goes better with a turkey sandwich than a glass of purple stuff,
he said as he walked over to the table. After eating, Mark looked at his watch and noticed that his mom would be home in another hour. He found a pad and pen on the counter near the phone. He scribbled down some words, grabbed his keys from the counter, and closed the door behind him. A young girl walked to the subway alone after having so much fun with her friends. A cool breeze slapped her face, sending a chill down her spine. Nervous, she turned around and saw no one. Suddenly, distant footsteps rang in her ears. The girl pressed forward, picking up the pace. The footsteps grew louder. She trotted but soon jogged. The footsteps grew even louder. She could faintly hear voices calling to her. The girl ran for dear life, zigzagging in the maze-like alleys. Mark walked to Seton Falls Park, located on the east side of Baychester Avenue, with his hands in his pockets. The cool breeze seemed to bring an eerie feeling to him. He noticed the streets were kind of quiet, especially around the usual drug spots. As he waited for the traffic light to change, he noticed 4 guys dressed in blue-colored street clothes surrounding a girl across the street. At first glance, Mark thought it was a prostitute trying to get some money, but as he stared closely at the girl, his eyes widened.
It's that girl I saw at the movies on Saturday. I don't know who those guys are, but I'm not gonna let them mess with her.
Mark ran across the street and pushed one of the guys off the girl.
What the hell you doing, player?
He asked angrily.
It ain't any of your business.
The guy answered. Mark stood there with his fists ready. He could tell these guys were going to be difficult to beat. Not only were they tall, but were muscular. Mark took a good look at his opponents. Each of them wore the same blue bandana and blue jacket. Mark's body froze in terror, realizing he was messing with the Crips, a notorious gang in the Bronx.
Looks like this rump wants to protect his girl,
another guy said. The others laughed. Mark clenched his fist tightly while gnashing his teeth.
You want to make something of it, punk?
The guy asked.
I don't want to fight you guys.
Mark slowly answered.
Just let the girl go.
This bitch is willing to give me the satisfaction I need,
he said, grabbing her waist in one hand and unbuttoning her blouse with the other.
And I don't need you to ruin it for me, aight?
Mark watched helplessly as the guy opened her blouse, revealing her lacy navy blue bra and cross-shaped birthmark above her left breast. Mark wanted to help her, but his legs remained glued to the ground. Mark knew he would get beat up if he helped her, but he couldn't shake the feeling of watching her get raped. The girl struggled to get free, kicking and crying out in fear, but the guy's grip was too strong. The guy chuckled with delight as his hand cupped her right breast and began to caress it. Tears ran down her cheeks as embarrassment and shame pierced her heart. Mark's body trembled with both anger and fear as he watched the guy press the girl against the wall, holding her wrists over her head with one hand. The girl felt her jeans become loose as her matching panties were slowly appearing. She felt his hand rub in between her thighs. She turned away, hoping the uneasy feeling would subside. Mark had enough of this horrible scene. He dashed forward and punched the guy in the face, making it cave in. The guy flew backwards and smacked the ground hard, leaving a small bloody trail. Mark walked over to the cowering girl and knelt beside her. He took off his jacket and covered her, gently holding her in his arms. The trembling stopped as she looked up at Mark. Everything about him seemed to make this horrible event slowly disappear.
Touch her again and I swear I'll kick your ass,
he said furiously.
You're gonna get a serious-ass whooping, kid,
another guy said as he cracked his knuckles. Mark stood in front of the girl with his fists ready.
Nice knowing ya, kid.
He cried as he threw the first punch. The tattoo glowed. Mark dodged the blow, countering with an uppercut. The guy staggered backwards. Mark dashed forward and punched him in the face. The guy's cheek caved in as his body became weightless. He smacked the ground hard, tumbling past the girl and crashing into the wall. Smack! Mark felt a hard blow from behind. He fell to the ground. Mark struggled to get up as the remaining two guys began kicking him in the ribs. Mark tried to fight them off, but their strong blows were too much to bear. With one strong kick, Mark was tossed aside like a rag doll. The girl's eyes widened in terror as she slowly crawled to him. Mark twitched as he slowly came to. He struggled to get up as blood ran down his cheek and dripped onto the ground. Suddenly, he felt a warm hand wipe away the blood. He looked up and saw the girl struggling to make the bleeding stop. Mark smiled and knew what he had to do. He had to metamorph. He slowly got up and glared at the gang members. The girl quickly hid behind a dumpster. With all his strength, Mark shouted,
Panza!
Instantly, a bright light illuminated the area. Everyone shielded their eyes, trying to make sense of their surroundings. The light faded. Mark looked down at his hands and realized they transformed into claws.
Beast of the Bronx. Huh? What was that weird feeling I just had?
Andrew thought as he stared at the wall. He laid his pencil down on his notebook and walked over to the window. Andrew peeked through the blinds, staring at the sky for a moment. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he had a strong feeling Mark was in on this. Andrew quickly changed his pants and put on a jacket. He transformed and snuck out the window, leaping around until he landed onto the ground.
Mark, please don't be there.
Andrew thought as he dashed towards his best friend. Mark's transformation was amazing. He was covered in black fur and had a long, skinny tail. His muscles bulged, and his feet were in a tiptoe position like Andrew's. Mark's mouth and nose extended outward a little, and his triangular ears had moved upward to the top of his head. He had glowing yellow eyes, razor-sharp claws, and drooling fangs. To Mark's surprise, he was still wearing his clothes.
Oh snap!
He growled loudly.
I've become Panza and my clothes are still on. Now that's tight.
Get away, you freak!
Cried one of the guys.
I'll stay away after I kick your ass.
Mark said, grinning. He dashed forward at the nearest Crip member and began his assault. With one punch, the guy tumbled to the ground and crashed into a store across the street. Absorbed by fear, the remaining Crip members drew out their guns and began firing. A hailstorm of bullets headed straight for Mark. Mark froze. He knew he was strong, but not bulletproof. He raised his hands to shield himself. He could feel his life flashing before his eyes, yet his mind was focused on having some kind of shield. Suddenly a shadow-like wall rose in front of him and absorbed the shots.
Did I do this? I wonder what else I can do.
The shadowy wall vanished to the ground. Mark stared at the guys with his yellow eyes and grinned.
My turn,
he said.
Shadow Fang!
Instantly, a shadowy rug rose from underneath Mark's feet. It began to transform into a giant mouth with sharp fangs and white eyes. Shocked, the crypt members ran for their lives. They screamed in terror as the shadowy rug chased them down the alley. To the girl, the chase scene reminded her of an old Scooby-Doo cartoon. She giggled as she clenched Mark's jacket, keeping it from falling off. The shadowy rug rose into the air and came crashing down onto the crypt members, covering them in a dark purple, shadowy blob.
Help us, man!
One guy cried, trying to breathe.
Get us out of here!
Exclaimed another guy, waving his arm furiously.
Mess with her and I'll make sure you guys won't live to see another day.
Mark said, staring at them angrily.
We won't!
The guy exclaimed.
Just get us out of here!
Mark removed the shadowy blob. They got up and scurried down the alley. Mark de-transformed. He walked over to the girl to see if she was all right. At first, she was afraid to look at Mark. She stepped back, bumping into the wall. Mark stopped. He could see she didn't trust him. He kept his eyes fixed to the ground. Suddenly he heard footsteps. He looked up and saw her walking towards him. She looked at Mark with her green eyes and smiled.
Thank you,
she said in a low voice.
Hey, I couldn't let those bastards hurt you,
replied Mark with a smile.
By the way, what's your name?
My name is Tracy.
My name is Mark, so you're the girl from art class.
Tracy raised an eyebrow.
Are you in my class?
No, I watched you present your piece out in the hall. I would have stayed for the whole thing, but I had to go to the bathroom. Don't get me wrong, I ain't no stalker. I just...
Tracy giggled.
I understand. No need to apologize.
Mark smiled. By the grace of God, Mark finally got his chance to talk to Tracy. It was like a dream come true. Still, Mark was nervous. As much as he wanted to ask her, no words would formulate. Suddenly, Andrew came from around the corner to find Mark and Tracy unharmed. Mark was surprised to see him, and yet Andrew had a feeling Mark didn't want him there.
Great timing,
Mark said sarcastically.
Sorry, but I had a feeling you were in trouble.
Nothing I couldn't handle.
You metamorphed?
I did.
Did anyone see you?
I did.
Tracy answered shyly.
If he didn't, metamorph, I would have been raped and Mark would have died.
Andrew looked at her for a moment and realized she was the girl Mark was trying to holler at.
Drew, this is Tracy,
Mark said, introducing her to Andrew.
Tracy, this is Andrew.
Nice to meet you,
Andrew said, shaking her hand.
Can you also metamorph?
She asked Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew answered, feeling embarrassed.
You're not going to tell anyone?
Don't worry, your secret is safe with me,
Tracy answered. One of the crypt members told Hideshi about Mark's transformation. Anger overwhelmed Hideshi. Glass scattered everywhere as he crushed his cocktail drink with his bare hand. The crypt member trembled with fear, feeling Hideshi's demonic aura. The guy fled. Hideshi sat in his chair and pondered for a moment. A smile spread over his face as he slowly came back to reality. He picked up the phone on his desk, pushing the speed dial button.
Hello?
Asked the desk clerk.
Get me Professor Yin.
Hideshi answered.
1 moment, please,
replied the desk clerk. 2 minutes passed by, then a voice answered the phone.
This is Yen,
he said.
Ah, Yen. This is Hideshi.
Hideshi said.
I have a job for you.
What is it?
Yen asked, sounding curious.
I need some reinforcements. When can they be here?
In 6 days, sir.
Excellent.
Hideshi said, grinning.
Notify me when they arrive.
Hideshi hung up. He placed his elbows on the desk. A huge grin spread over his face as he folded his hands and rested his chin on top of them.
It's only a matter of time before I claim the world,
he said, and laughed psychotically. Both Andrew and Mark have finally metamorphed. But will it be enough to defeat Hideshi and his forces? Find out next time on Beast of the Bronx.
Yeah. Would it be cool to say? Yeah, intuition, just wanna follow intuition. All my senses tell me I know what you've been thinking. I've been feeling, what if we got up, left this party? Cause I can see you're probably gonna be scrolling feeds all night long. And your friends are drunk, and the DJ keeps playing the same songs, and time isn't moving along. So would it be